Hello, and welcome to episode 26 of Creative Dynamos. Today I have the pleasure of having with me, today I have the pleasure of having Arlo Graves with me on the podcast. Arlo, I don't know what it is about my intros, but I have the devil of the time, spitting out the name of my podcast, in spite of the fact that I've done this 26 times now. And the fact that I'm usually a fairly well-spoken individual, but it's the joy of speaking into a microphone. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Just give me a moment to start talking myself in circles. I'll be a good match. I'll talk myself into a corner. It'll be great.
Arlo and I met over Threads, where we have, talked about a lot of different things. And there's a really good community over there for writers and creative people. And I just want to let my audience know that one of the things that's going to happen in the new year is there are going to be a lot of these interviews that are going to be with musicians in the future. I've got over the last couple of days, I have touched base with a lot of musicians, and I'm going to be scheduling those interviews for the spring and early part of the summer. So right now I have interviews scheduled for out through the beginning of May, which is super exciting. And
That's cool.
that's an average of 2 to 3 shows a week. So lots of content coming down the pipeline, more than just writers, but I love talking to my fellow writers. So with that out of the way, Arlo, tell me a little bit about how long you've been a writer and what got you started down that path.
So there's just kind of two starting points in that. The first starting point would be I've known I wanted to be a writer for since before I could write. I was in a special ed class. I think that was second grade. I don't know, somewhere a long time ago. And they gave us an assignment to rewrite Cinderella. And I couldn't write. I couldn't read. And I just went home and dictated this story to my mom, who typed it up on this ancient Windows 95 computer. And I drew like little pictures or whatever for it. But I think that was the hook. I'm like, oh, yeah, I want to write stories. And then I started, when I could write somewhat, I started writing Neopets fan fiction. You got to start somewhere. But I it's like a compulsion. I love writing and I love learning about writing. And for a really long time, I felt like I was stuck in a loop of I have stories to tell. I'm getting better at telling them every year and I'm having no traction. And then one day I was walking across the Safeway parking lot to CVS and I hear someone behind me say, "That is a really cool coat you're wearing." And I turned around and was like, "Hey, thanks. It is a really cool coat. It's by a designer, KO Anime Clothing. She makes really unique pieces." I was like, "Hey, thanks." And the person says, "You look like you stepped right out of a fantasy novel." And I would know because I'm a fantasy author. And I was like, "Really?" Anyway, that was Lillian Cernica, and we became friends. She is awesome. She looked at my work and helped me learn how to edit better and do developmental work on my writing. And she got me using Duotrope and introduced me to people in the writing world. And my very first professional sale was through a contest that I found on Duotrope. And it was for the story that's in Stories That Need to Be Told. And I feel like that was my jumping off point. Once I got that professional sale, I just had so much more confidence. I did a live pitch. That's how I sold Black Rose. And that was something for years, I was like, I'm never going to do a live pitch. I don't have the social skills. I don't have the charisma. And Lillian walked me through it. She's like, "No, you do it and you're going to be fine." And I did it and I was fine. And so now I'm in a way different place mentally. I'm not telling myself, "Oh, I can't do this or I won't do this." I'm like, why don't we try? Why don't we try? Why don't we see? So I hope that answers the question. I've known I wanted to write for a very long time. And it's taken a very long time to build the skills and then also a very long time to kind of get into the world of writing.
Absolutely. You did a great job answering the question. And speaking of somebody who has a goal this year of becoming a writing teacher slash mentor. I pitched my first writing workshop to a local
Oh, that's cool.
makerspace. And so I'll be teaching a writing workshop, hopefully. I'm not sure on a date on that yet, but teaching basically how to outline a novel, the beginning steps of how to outline a novel. It is, I think it's going to be really meaningful to be passing some of my knowledge along to future writers. And as looking back on my own writing history, the mentors that I've had along the way, whether they were English teachers in high school, which I had a couple that were huge mentors of mine in terms of introducing me to some of the best fiction that I have ever read and were instrumental in my own decision to become an English teacher, which didn't happen, but which put me on the path to learning to love literature and learning to create my own stories, to the writers who coached me along the way in my early attempts at writing. Like that kind of connection to a mentor is priceless.
Yeah.
And that's part of what I want to do with this podcast and my other projects is to do for other writers what other writers have done for me.
Oh, I love that. If you don't mind me asking, where's your workshop? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be in person? That sounds really cool.
I'm going to do a version for my patrons. I'll do like a YouTube live, but it'll be private for my patrons. I'll probably make that public at some point and like a recorded version. And then I might try and figure out how to do a like a virtual version for like for customer, yeah, for paid customers, I guess.
That's so cool.
But this is going to be, and I live in the western part of North Carolina,
Hmm.
and so yeah, it'll be a local, and hopefully it'll be the start of many. The makerspace that it's with, they're a really cool outfit. They're relatively new. They've been open for a few years, and this will be the first writing related class that they've done. Yeah, we're working right now on what that's going to look like, how much it's going to cost, that kind of stuff. And yeah, then I'm hoping to leverage that into maybe some one-on-one classes for people who want that, or some group classes either online or in person. So yeah, because I really think I've got a lot to bring to the table in terms of helping people learn to write. I'm by no means am I the most successful writer, but that doesn't have anything to do with the quality of one's writing. There are some amazing writers that nobody's ever heard of. And there are some absolutely tragically horrible writers that everybody's heard of. We're not going to name any names on this podcast, but one of them has written a book that's got something to do with like the phase of the day that happens towards the end of the day, but before it's fully dark. And that absolutely,
No comment.
yeah, no comment. So whatever you may think of that, regardless, I think that I've got a lot to bring to the table, and I want to, yeah, I want to do that and see. And I mean, crash and burn, but I figure,
No, you're not going to crash and burn. That sounds so awesome.
well, and I don't mean that in the way that I'm going to fail ultimately, but I think that the first time you try anything, the potential for failure is high. And
That is true.
for me, and I talked about this with another guest, like failure is the only way that we learn.
Yeah, that is true. Yep.
The only way that we get better. And if my first class is a wild success, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
But I am prepared for it to just be like something that's a huge learning experience, and then it's not going to stop me from doing more. And that's the other message that I like to send out to people is like, my first novel didn't sell worth a hill of beans the first few years it was out, but it's gaining traction, and my other novels are gaining traction. And you can't expect to be a success with your first thing or in your first year. Now there are exceptions to that, of course, but to expect to be a success right out of the gate, to expect to be making a living your first year in any kind of creative endeavor is unrealistic. Like I said, you could be the exception to the rule, and you could go huge, but it's the long game. We're in this for
Mhm.
the rest of our lives. We're going to tell stories, and And I look forward to your writing as it continues to grow and mature and improve.
Oh, thank you.
And I've started reading Black Rose. And one of the things that I appreciate about it is it reminds me in a lot of ways of China Mieville. I don't know if you've read any of his books. So China has this really poetic grasp of language and these very richly detailed universes. And the concept of writing in a genre doesn't seem to mean anything to him. Like he takes all of the things that he likes and he throws it into a blender and he hits frappe and
Ooh, I need to check out his work. This sounds right up my alley.
this technicolor, like amazing and sometimes very dark stuff comes out on the pages. And it's very much like what I've read. I've read a few of his things, but what I've read of his things, like there's elements of the Western, like there is in Black Rose. There's elements of the fantastic, like there is in Black Rose. And I think you'd really like his work. I highly recommend it. And for those in the audience that if you've read any of China Mieville's work, check out Black Rose. What is it about the blending of genres that speaks to you as a writer? Because I feel like there's some intentionality there.
I'm not exactly sure I have a very solid grasp on genre and or genre expectation to begin with. I read in a ton of different genres, and the program that I went through, I went to UCSC and I studied creative writing with Mika Perks and Karen Yamashita, who are excellent. But no, there's no but. They're excellent. The way that we approached fiction was very like magical realism. I would not say that my work is magical realism at all, but I think my message is I go into it. I mean, different projects I go into in different ways. Black Rose is kind of a unique. She's kind of unique. Is it okay if I talk a little bit how she came to me? So it was a fan fiction that I wrote when I was 17, and I did not write a whole story. I wrote about 20 pages, and it was Van Helsing, like the Hugh Jackman Van Helsing story, meets Tombstone with Kurt Russell.
Huge fan.
And like Kurt Russell has that cool buntline revolver with the big old barrel. And I don't know, I hyperfixated on both of those. And I was like, I need to mash these together. And so I'm like, well, I want Van Helsing in the American West. It's going to be great. And I wrote this scene where he's having this gunfight with this creature with silver hair. It was like basically like every person's OC from like that time frame, like the edgy OC with the white hair is like everyone's OC, like, and they had this ridiculous revolver it was Wyatt Earp's gun. And then I only wrote 20 pages, but then like I would talk about it with my dad just nonstop. And there was this whole scene that took place in like this abandoned, I think in the original, it was a church or like a mission or something. But it took place in this abandoned location. They were shooting at each other and there were silver bullets. But then my dad was like, oh, the gun should be a character. The gun should talk. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I like that. And then every single year as I'm working towards being a writer and I'm going to school to be a writer and I'm getting rejected and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, he's like, when are you going to write Black Rose? And I'm like, I'm looking at the elements of this story and I'm like, the gun talks. There's a white-haired, like a silver-haired, overpowered, like OC character. There's a Van Helsing type character. I'm like, this is bonkers. Like this is so stupid. And then my friend Lillian from early years, she was like, nothing is too stupid. Like nothing is too stupid. What if you just played it absolutely dead serious? And I sat down, I was like, you know what? Yes. I think once the idea came to mind, I think I wrote the rough draft in like 14 days. It just all came together. It all made sense. It's unhinged. And the mechanisms of the universe are I don't know. If I say they're very strange, I feel like that's like patting myself on the back. But like they are actually I think they're kind of strange. The silver is liquid and it comes out of the ground. And then I just went on this weird side quest of going to the locations where the story takes place and researching like the real history. So it has these very real world elements with the silver mines, and there really are feral burrows that live out there that were just left after they stopped mining. Like there's a lot of real history kind of hidden in this insane world where the premise is the more you use an object or a machine, the more sentience it acquires until it becomes a fully autonomous object. And I don't know, that the only genre I really focused on was Western. I never would have called it horror myself. To me, it was just a fantasy Western. But other people read it and they're like, oh, this fits horror, the horror genre. And I'm like, okay, you tell me. I don't know. I truly don't know.
Or, and I don't, I have to go look at my Kindle library to see how far I'm into it. But so far, it definitely has some horror elements. Like I would call it like a straight horror novel, but it's definitely got elements of the horror genre in it for sure.
Yeah, I read, oh my God, my mom read all the Louis L'Amour books to me when I was younger, and I tried to put little nuggets from Louis L'Amour through it. So it was really, and
She were raised right.
yeah, but I really went in with this vision of I need to tell a story that's this Van Helsing Tombstone mashup, white haired, overpowered OC talking gun. How do I make it work? And I'm really proud of it. It's 1 inch. It's 1 inch. I'm very pleased.
So I think part of the reason it speaks to me as a reader. So I have to tell you about an anthology that I put together
Oh, cool.
years ago, and it's called The Way of the Gun. And
Ooh.
I had this idea. I wrote this short story. Really, it started with a scene. I had this ancient gunslinger, like super, like in his late 70s, and he has this kid that he's mentoring, and the kid challenges these two hombres, two bad hombres, to a duel that takes place in a metal circle in the center of town.
Ooh.
And apparently, every town has a dueling circle that is a steel circle in the center of town in this world. And he's like, "You're not ready, kid." And he breaks the kid's hand because apparently you know that game where you hold your hands like this and the other person holds their hand like this, and the
Yeah.
goal is to slap the top of the other person's hand.
Yeah.
That's a ritual that they do to test reflexes. And he breaks the kid's hand in that sort of pre-fight reflex test. And the law of the land says that he could, if as his second, if he's disabled, he can step into the ring. And so you've got this ancient gunslinger stepping into the ring with these two at the same time to fight these two bad guys. And so I was like, well, okay, I created a lot of terminology in a lot of situations, and I'm like, okay, what is this world all about? So basically you've got rangers, like the Texas Rangers, but these rangers are essentially like martial arts instructors senseis who wander around looking to teach up and coming youngins about the way of the gun, which is I stole whole cloth from Bushido. And you've got marshals, which I spell like martial arts, and like Western marshals. And they're the lawgivers. And so they serve the same purpose as marshals in the Old West. And they have taken an oath to this way of the gun. And then you've got the judges who are largely corrupt in this world. And so the only real justice you get is the frontier justice. that the marshals bring. And so I wrote this short story, and I was like, well, I can't just, this story will not sell to anyone because it's too weird. So I need to put an anthology together. So I opened the world up to 5 other authors and explained the details of the world to them, and ended up creating an anthology that basically has this world, this situation. But I said, do whatever you want to outside of these rules that I've established. And so one story has Native Americans who are like ninjas. You've got one guy decided to add steampunk mech and kaiju to it. One guy decided to add vampires to it.
I want to read this. This sounds great.
Yeah, it's like basically if you took a spaghetti western, if you took like the martial arts, Shaw Brothers martial arts movies that play on TV on Sunday afternoons, and you took all of the other your favorite genre tropes from like horror and science fiction and steampunk and all that stuff, and you threw it into a blender and you hit pulverize, you got this anthology. And so I did an updated cover and added 2 new short stories to it this year. Well, I guess I should say last year now, technically. So now it's got 8 short stories and it's a lot of fun. But all of that to say, the concept of a weird Western with like other genre tropes thrown in and stuff like that's like catnip for me. Perhaps
It's good. I've got my notebook ready. I need to know the title of this.
The Way of the Gun, a Bushido Western anthology. And I'm bound to do another one in this world at some point because, you know, it's I will probably do a novel at some point with my character because I had my character and my main character, the Ranger, the old gunslinger, and his sort of love interest. So you've also got like this love story between him and this older woman who kind of, I picture like an older Katharine Hepburn, and she's kind of a doctor, and there's a religion in this world that is, they worship the clockmaker. And if you're a follower of the clockmaker, you're a cog. And one of the guys wrote a steampunk story called The Shining Cog. And it's about this pacifist who gets challenged to a gunfight, and he has to come up with like a non-lethal way to fight this guy. And so anyway, followers of the clockmaker, these cogs, their way of worship is like making things. So it's steampunk as worship. Yeah.
You have my full attention.
And so that aspect of it, like in my friend Doc's story, The Shining Cog, he blew that concept up. And that was one of the things I loved about this anthology is everybody like took these little nuggets and just like blew them up. And that really fleshed out the universe. But yeah, there's this love story between my ranger character and the medicine one, and she ends up being this badass. And it's, yeah. So there will be a novel probably at some point because I want to tell their backstory and stuff. But that's one of the problems with being a writer.
Cool.
It's one of the problems of being a writer is so many ideas and not enough time to write them all. But I love genre mashups. I love genre mashups like The Black Rose, and especially ones that involve things like tropes from Westerns, tropes from like martial arts, cinema, horror, for sure. That's one of the when you mentioned the Van Helsing movie, like that crossbow that he had in the Van Helsing movie. Oh, like I would sneak that into a book somewhere if I had the guts.
It was pretty cool. Yeah, I'm really curious. You got to get when you see the end of Black Rose. I'm curious what you think is the where it goes, where the crazy train ride stops. I'll be interested.
I will definitely let you know. Turning the conversation back to you, one of the things that I pulled from your website, and yes, of course, like warning to future guests, like I look for your website and I read your website and often find some really cool things. And if I don't find your website, I get really disappointed. That's that with you. You are drawn to the dark, the strange, and the beautiful. And I love that. What dark, strange, beautiful things have you been drawn to lately?
lately.
And lately can be as big a time frame as you need it to be.
I'm literally fascinated with nighttime. I'm very, very sensitive to sunlight, like dangerously sensitive to sunlight. I'll get really sick if I get too much sun exposure. And so, but I love being outside. So I'll go hiking at nighttime. I like to go to the beach at night. I really like to be out and about at night, all sorts of places. I love the ocean and I love dark nautical stuff. But if we're talking like the dark and the strange, I've been through I've been through some weird situations and I've seen some weird things. There's two that are jumping up in my imagination as we're talking. There's a content warning for anyone listening for gun violence. I was in a shootout in Santa Cruz. They were shooting from it was a gang on gang, and they were shooting from a car at someone across, like right over top of my friend and I, and we like laid down on the sidewalk and like crawled to a restaurant, called 911. At the time, it wasn't scary. I don't know what was up with that, but it's jumping into my mind because like I look back on it and when I tell the story, I laugh a lot, and there's nothing funny about it. It was really horrifying. But in the moment, we were like, wow, that was weird. Okay. And then the other thing that's jumping up, I guess it's just an experience I've had. I'm like, that's a thing that I've been in. Cool. Cool, guys. Mission Street, Santa Cruz. Anyway, the other thing that comes to mind is we went through the CZU lightning complex fire. So I live in a abandoned cabin, or it used to be abandoned, and my partner and I have rebuilt it by hand, bit by bit. He's still not done. There's a lot to go. We got him really comfortable, and we're like, it's time to take a 5-year break. But we live in this we live in this cabin, and
This is the cabin named George, right?
Gerald, yeah.
Gerald. Okay.
Yeah, this is Gerald. And we went through the CZU lightning complex fire. And my parents, like, we're on my parents' property. So they live right down the hill from us. Basically, they built their house. And then the property that we live on, they were able to purchase it very, very cheap because it was filled with trash. It was very special. But we spent years rebuilding him, and then we're going through this fire, and a helicopter lowers down over the house and is like, you have 15 minutes to get out, blah, 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 like fire. And so we leave, and then everybody gets out, and then my parents send me this text, and it gets cut off. So I don't get the full context because the cell towers are down. So it's like I got half the message, and then I'll get half of it later that night. But they sent me a text that read more or less like, we're going to go into the neighborhood and we're going to save the houses or die trying. And that's not what they meant, but that's like what I got from it. And I'm like, okay. But they ended up defending the property with the neighbors like right at the house. And so, God, it was weeks before, like, then after that, like the firefighters drew a line right there, right on the road, and backburned. And then they locked everyone out. Then it was weeks before we could get back. I think we were evacuated for 7 weeks total, maybe more. And we come back in, and the entire state of California is just still on fire. And we're having these plumes of smoke. And I remember I think it was a Wednesday, and it was the middle of the day. And there was so much smoke in the air that the entire woods had become darker than twilight. It was like dark as if it was a full moon, but the light was orange. And I remember just walking around and sitting on the front steps of the house, just like, this is horrifying. This is horrifying. This is apocalyptic. But it's also kind of like, it's also really beautiful and really cool. And I really hope I never experience this ever again, but I'm going to just sit here for a minute and it's happening now. So I think I'm just going to sit and I'm just going to experience it while it is happening. And like, that was like, you'll see pictures from San Francisco where it looks like Blade Runner, everything is orange. Like it was that. So those are the things that jump to mind, but I really just literal darkness. I like being in the literal dark, and I like monsters. I like stories with monsters because I really like, it's getting out the sticks here, but like, I definitely feel like an outsider looking in, and I often relate to the monsters or the creatures. I could ramble forever and ever and on always, but
So are you a fan of, Guillermo del Toro at all?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I was going to be disappointed if that was a no.
Oh, no. I relate very hard to
It
a
would have
lot
been,
of
it would have been okay if it was a no because I've never watched anything of his or something like that. But like the
Oh no, I am deep. I've cosplayed Prince Nuwata from Hellboy too. Like I've made the whole costume for that. I'm deep into it.
the love that that man has for his monsters is just incredible.
Yeah. And have you seen the new
Go ahead.
have you seen the new Frankenstein?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I did not get to see it in theaters, but I have a pretty big screen at home. So actually, I should break out my actual, like I have a projector and a big roll up screen. I should break that out and screen it on that thing. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was blown away by that movie. You know, people are like, oh, it's not exactly the same as the book. He said he was going to try and do it. Like,
Oh, it's so good though.
that's okay. Like, it's fine.
So good. It's so good.
It's good. You know, it's,
I relate so hard to the creature, and I don't these are private conversations, but I think it's interesting that I've had like private conversations with other neurodivergent authors who really see themselves in the creature, and same. And it's just, he's so beautiful and like so relatable.
I've always strongly identified with monsters and with the outcast. Like I was telling my wife, like a good friend of mine and my wife's from college is the straightest of straight arrows. Like he is just, and he's like this marketing guru and this life coach and just absolute straight arrow. He's a big Stephen King fan. He's a big heavy metal fan. These are two things you would not ever guess by simply looking at him, looking at his LinkedIn page, looking at his Facebook page. And he recently wrote a short story, a horror short story. And I was like, I cannot wait to read this thing because I told my wife, like, I want to see, this is going to tell me what kind of trauma he has experienced because every horror author I know, and I know quite a few, processes some amount of their trauma through writing their fiction.
Mhm.
And I am probably going to be able, like, I'm not going to jump to any conclusions, but I'm probably going to be able to get some sense of a deeper sense of who he is as a person because of this story that he wrote. And I think I have. And I think that that is like I think a common thread that runs through a lot of writers, not just horror writers, but a lot of writers is just this identity, this outsider identity. And I know I'm sure it expands beyond writers to musicians and other artists, but like the writing is a very lonely pursuit. And,
Yeah.
and just so many of us were kids and no friends or one friend. And we just created these elaborate universes in our head. And when we had the tools to
Oh yeah.
express these universes on paper, as soon as we could, we did. And sometimes they're beautiful, sometimes they're terrifying, but yeah, they're probably always interesting as long as we let ourselves like really express what's going on. And that's what I love about talking. That's why I love talking with other writers about this kind of stuff. Is just what was your trauma?
You'll definitely find it. You'll finish Black Rose and you'll be like, aha, I found it. Same with the Ice Moves for No One. It's like, aha, there it is.
But yeah, like you're right. So many of us identify with like Frankenstein's monster, or my personal favorite monster is the creature from the Black Lagoon. My favorite is the creature. My favorite monster, classic monster, is Creature from the Black Lagoon. So I loved The Shape of Water.
Oh, it's so good. I loved it.
Possibly my favorite Del Toro movie, and that's hard to choose because they're all.
Yeah.
I haven't seen all of his movies, but I've seen all of his like everything after everything, including Pan's Labyrinth forward. Um, and yeah, hands down, if I, gun to my head, Shape of Water. But
So good.
and not just because of the creature, but that scene where she's dancing with the creature.
Yeah.
No other director would have the guts to write such a bonkers scene and put it on the screen and make
So
it
good.
beautiful and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It would be comical under anybody else's directorial touch
Yeah.
if they even tried it. So, Stranger Things. We also talked about that before we hit record. You're a fan of Stranger Things.
I am. I definitely like it's so funny. I talk about it so much with my partner because from a writing standpoint, I think I have not that I'm like qualified to do this, but just like from a craft perspective, I'm like, I think I would have liked to have seen a shorter show with maybe some different choices. But you know what? I enjoyed what I saw. And there's a lot that I really like in the in this final season. Like there's moments that I know my partner and I have been sitting there, we're like, but then there were moments that I'm like, I have been waiting 5 seasons to see that. Thank you. Thank you. That was really well done. Good job. So I think like from a critical perspective, there's things that I'm like, but at the same time, it's like, I can let it go. I don't have to pick it apart. I can enjoy what I got and be grateful that it got made. Cause like, damn, I'm glad it got made. Yeah.
Yeah, like 5 seasons of a show that's about a bunch of D&D nerds
Yeah.
living out their not just fantasy, but yeah, in some sense, living out their fantasy. Like it and like the amount of pathos and just yeah, there's just so much good stuff to chew on in that series. Like
Yeah.
if I had the time and the inclination, if I were to ever do a podcast that was like a watch through podcast, I would do a Stranger Things watch through podcast. Like, yes, there are things that I would do differently as a creator, but then it would be a different show.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the same show. And the Duffer Brothers, for all the decisions they made that I disagree with, and they probably made 3 decisions that I was like, yes, absolutely. I wouldn't have like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then
I,
there were several things that they have laid out along the way that paid off so beautifully. Yeah.
yeah.
So how does your appreciation for all of these things, be it the sort of strangely traumatic like experiences that you've had, but at the same time you've appreciated on some level, to the great but strange and beautiful art that you like to consume? How are those things kind of combine to affect your writing? Are these conscious kind of things that you're aware of when you're writing something, or is it just sort of subconsciously manifesting itself?
Definitely both. But I will say that I love writing speculative fiction because it acts as a translation tool between what can be really alienating experiences or really frightening experiences. And my hope is that, or like really intense topics, my hope is that speculative fiction can be that translation tool to help readers feel empathy or connection towards something that they might otherwise not be able to. The, I'm very much in progress, learning, working on my craft. So I don't know if I'm landing these goals, but that is my goal. And I think that answers the question. But there is definitely some of it's intentional, some of it is not. But I do have the intentionality of trying to translate between things that are deeply isolating or personal and helping or maybe not helping, but allowing people to understand or to connect with something.
I love the fact that speculative fiction allows us to talk about sensitive topics
Yes.
in ways that are maybe a little less threatening,
Yeah.
and to deal with deeply personal issues that are personal to us and that'll be personal to other people, but to do it in a way that isn't like preachy like, I guess to put it in a positive way, that are interesting and engaging and potentially educational for the people that need it to be educational.
Yeah.
I think about like I've taken on topics like aging and fun, you know, gender identity, sexuality, and racism and things like that in my work. And the challenge and faith, which is a very personal thing for me, and trying to do that in a way that is engaging, that particularly for me, like talking about my faith in my stories, which I don't do a lot, but I do it. When I do it, I really do it, doing it in such a way where a person of a similar faith can enjoy it and engage with it on that level, but also make it enjoyable for a person who that's not an important thing to them, but they can still engage with the story and find things in it that are enjoyable and interesting and maybe even informative, is a lot of fun. And it's very challenging. And it's one of the things I love about being a creator, is finding ways to challenge myself to stretch and grow as a communicator, because our writing is communicating things.
Yeah.
Whether we intend it or not, we communicate so much with our fiction. There should be intentionality. Of course, there's always going to be subconscious things that are going to show up. But yeah, intentionality is important. I'm going to do a video on this at some point. I swear I'm going to do a video essay or a blog post or something. But I was having a back and forth with somebody on Threads, and we're talking about representation in fiction, particularly of gay people, trans people, etc. And I was like, well, I'm going to consciously include people like this because people like this exist in the world, and they need to be included in my story because they exist in the world. And his comeback was, what if that doesn't meet your vision for the story? And I guess what this guy doesn't get is my vision for the story includes inclusivity. Like, my vision for
Yeah. What an interesting comment.
is always to be building a world that reflects reality in some way. And you touched on this earlier, and I meant to comment on this with Black Rose. You went to some actual places and did some on the ground research so that you had this gritty realism in this story that is otherwise fantastical. And I have always worked this in theory in my own writing, that the more fantastic your story is, the more you need to have something in your story that really grounds it to reality to create this. It highlights the fantastical elements. It gives it something to the story, but it also gives what's the word I'm looking for? Contrast. It gives contrast.
Yeah.
It gives your fantastical elements more contrast. So yeah, I think that what you're doing with Black Rose in terms of making sure that your setting is very realistic gives great contrast to the rest of the story, with things like talking guns and things like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I definitely had to go to the places. When I was writing the draft, I just Googled the locations and used what I could find on the internet, and going to them was a completely different experience. And I was expecting this desolate wasteland. That's how I originally wrote the book. And then I got there and I'm like, oh no, this is it's stark, it's barren, but it's gorgeous. And yeah, it was very different than what I expected. I don't think I'd ever been there.
The older I get, the more that when I first started writing, I didn't love research because I was lazy and I love just making shit up. But the older that I get and the more I write, the more I like to do research because of that theory that I have. And because I think that it's the more that we learn about whatever it is we're writing, the richer our story is going to be. And you're going to learn things exactly like what you learned.
Yeah.
Like what I've learned every time I've done research. Like, for example, when I had to research what life was like in Manhattan in the 1880s, 1890s for us, for some stories that I've done, you learn all kinds of fascinating things. And whether those things make it into your story or not directly, they're going to influence your writing of the story.
Yeah. I'll try to make this very quick, but it's related. For my other books, The Ice Moves for No One, there has been a lot of research into the groundwork of that one. Not all of it you'll see, some of it, it's a trilogy. So a lot of it you'll start getting in the second book, but I'm in California and I was like, I don't know anything about airships, and the book has airships. And I called up the Air Museum on the phone and asked them, hey, you wouldn't happen to know someone who knows something about airships? And they're like, we have just the person for you. Come on in. He's gonna love to talk about this. And I got there and the person there to meet me is this retired veteran who he didn't serve on the airship, but he had been, don't quote me on this. Don't quote me directly. I think had been on the Akron, but like, don't quote me on that one. But he knew so much about airships and was so excited to tell me about them. And he talked with me for, I think, 4.5 hours. And it was just the best experience. So like, I'm coming into an era of not being shy about asking if somebody knows something about a topic that I don't know about. Like, do you want to tell me about it? Cause I'd love to hear about it. Info dump on me.
And people love to talk about themselves for the most part, like, or about their experiences. Not making
Yeah.
people aren't all are all like eager to talk about themselves, but yeah, about
Yeah.
have special interests and stuff. Yeah, I love talking with experts who are passionate about their expertise. So one of the things that I noticed when I was looking at your profile on Threads is you have Ehlers-Danlos.
I do.
And I didn't know what that was until my youngest boyfriend came into our lives. And I still don't 100% understand what it means. So I would love for you, if you're willing to take a couple minutes and talk to us about what that's like and how that affects your life as a creator and just your life in general. As we talked about before we started, I think that talking about challenges and disabilities and things like that as creative people is a good way to normalize just those things in general, talking about those things in general.
Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit of backstory. I have an autoimmune disease, and it's called mixed connective tissue disease. Think similar to lupus, but not lupus. But it can cause inflammation in different body systems. And I've had 2 flare-ups were meningitis, which is a swelling of the thing that covers like the brain casing and the spinal cord and the nerves. I've had 2 bouts of that. One of them was really bad. I got hospitalized. That was like the first thing. And that was the whole thing. So they were like, okay, well, we're discharging you from the hospital. You're going to get better. You're fine. Go home. And I was never fine again. Anyway, but I had things before that, like definitely problems with fatigue and pain and migraines. And it actually wasn't until really recently that I mean, not super recently, but this year that I got the diagnosis with hypermobile EDS. A lot of it was my friend goading me into it. They were watching how my hands were bending and they were like, that's not normal. So it's a hypermobility disorder. And it's not that my muscles are flexible because they're not, but my joints are. And I also have some skin involvement. And being able to go to the doctor and get evaluated for it. And she's like, oh, yeah, we see it. It got missed years ago. I got sort of screened for it and it got missed because I can't touch my toes. But it's suddenly just like everything, so many things make sense because the autoimmune disease has sort of like flares and remissions. And even when I'm in remission, I'm like, wow, I have so much body pain and like all these problems with fatigue and like my hands are very, very screwed up when it comes to like dexterity. So like, this is a lot. And it's like, I was originally diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And I'm unsure if they got rid of that diagnosis in favor of EDS, but I definitely have EDS and it's very noticeable. Some of my joints go horrendously backwards. I won't show you on the camera, but yeah, living and creating in this way has been an experience. I use a lot of adaptive technology. So it's really hard for me to hold a pen and write for any length of time. So almost everything is done on a keyboard. I really only write with my two first fingers and this thumb. I can't use the rest of them. So it's just these guys go in and I can work really quickly that way. I'm also really very, very dyslexic, comically dyslexic. And so I'll have Microsoft Word. I have everything set to these really ridiculous parameters to be able to read on the screen, or it reads to me, not with AI voice, it's just robot voice. But yeah, so I have like like an electronic notebook that with a little keyboard that I can type in that I take with me. Then I have like a very comfortable sitting arrangement and like different areas of the house that I can go sit in because it hurts to like hold my back straight for any length of time. So I've got to be in my little comfort zone. So yeah, look, definitely a lot of adaptive technology, and then just understanding that I can't do anything for 8 hours a day. I'm going to just disintegrate. There's no way. I've tried. I've failed. It's not good. Yeah. I don't know if that answered the whole thing, but
It does. And I think that it's one of the reasons why it's important to talk about these things for me is I think for me, as someone who struggles with depression and anxiety, and I have some mysterious gastrointestinal thing that we're still trying to figure out, and chronic fatigue, and just, yeah, for a long time, I was just like, this is how everybody else is, right? Like,
oh yeah.
and like, when I, like, mentally, at some point, I was talking to my wife and I was like, I have these things called intrusive thoughts. And she was like, what is that? And I was like, you don't have them? And she was like, I don't even know what they are. And so I had to explain to her. And she said, that sounds like an absolute freaking nightmare. And I was like, oh, so you don't get those. And she was like,
Yeah.
no, absolutely not. And so I think that why it's important for others to hear this is a thing that exists. And if this sounds like you, go ask some questions of your doctor and see if that's you. So yeah, like I think and also for me as somebody who doesn't have, that has somebody in their life that has a similar or the same diagnosis, like it's important for me to hear from a different perspective what life is like and what you're doing to help live as normal a life as you can.
Yeah.
With the adaptive technologies and things and the other steps that you've taken
Yeah.
to make your quality of life good.
The biggest takeaway that I have, and I will caveat this with can be very challenging, especially where we are in the world as far as a country and whatever. But I have spent or wasted so much of myself and my life trying to be neurotypical and trying to not be disabled. If I can just work harder, I will not be that way. And I have broken myself so badly trying to do that or trying to hold myself to that standard. And it's a very nuanced topic because like we live in a world where you got to make money, you got to do this, but it's like there's hopefully flexibility for other people struggling with disabilities, but I know just for myself that trying to be neurotypical or trying to be not chronically ill has done so much more harm than just existing in the way that I am and trying to do the best I can with what I have, like the way that I am, like trying to hold myself to these standards that maybe even non-disabled neurotypical people shouldn't be forcing themselves to do. It's just, I've broken myself real hard.
And you're also on the autism spectrum as well.
Yes. Yeah. I was a nonverbal kid of the whole thing.
I have 3 kids and they're all on the autism spectrum. And I have not been diagnosed autistic, but I am autistic. And I talked to my therapist about being diagnosed, and she was like, you're in your 50s. If you got a diagnosis, that would be primarily for your own satisfaction. There's not a whole lot that you would necessarily get out of it in terms of any benefits. So it's up to you. And I decided not to get a diagnosis. But, when you've got 3 kids that are all autistic, and every time I see them do things, and I'm like, that looks like me.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was diagnosed as a kid with, I cannot pull the acronym out of the ether without looking at it, but it's under the autism umbrella. Basically, they were like, this person can't talk, they can't read, there's something wrong with them. But they were like, well, this person is a girl, so, they can't be autistic. And then later they're like, oh, yeah, that is autism. And it was very funny because I had very like almost like stereotypical like trait. I'm like, ooh, trains. I'm like very obsessed with trains and dinosaurs. It's like so stereotypical. But then I got reevaluated as an adult. And I think something that was really important, or has been really useful, I should say, to me, is there was a ton of interviewing and a ton of questionnaires and just like weeks and weeks and weeks of this. And they were able to put together a profile of where I have strengths and where I have deficits in a way that I couldn't assess for myself. And that's been really useful.
So 2 of my kids are AFAB, and for the listeners that don't know, sorry, female at birth, and their autism was very atypical, which is typical for AFAB people, for it to be atypical. I guess you can say something is atypical or typical. Or, for my son, my AMAB son, his autism was very typical. He was nonverbal for quite a while. He didn't learn how to read until later. He was absolutely fascinated by spider webs. I am too, but I think just because spider webs are fascinating. But like there are things that just held his interest, and just a lot of things that were pretty typical. And we got him diagnosed earlier than I think a lot of kids get diagnosed, because we were in a unique situation at that point. And it's been varying degrees of helpful for all of them to get the diagnosis. But yeah, it's been interesting as an adult, gradually, like I got diagnosed with ADD last year and started on medication for that. That was a game changer. Trying to find a diagnosis for my own physical ailments, and so far not succeeding. Coming to terms with the word disabled and the word disability has been a challenge for me. And so I think that's another reason why it's important for me to have like these kind of conversations with people who have disabilities, and it's just for me to normalize it for myself, but also for other people who might have the same struggle with just these concepts and these words, labels and things. I think labels are important. And I think these terms are all very important. And we need to encourage people to get diagnosed and to figure out what works for them in terms of treatment and adaptive technologies and coping mechanisms and things like that. Just, don't just deny the things that are happening in your life that are causing you difficulties. Find ways to make your life better, and instead of just sort of curling up into a ball and just hoping that it's all going to go away. advocate for your mental health, advocate for your physical health, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And that's the end of the soapbox portion.
No, I wanted to say thank you for talking with me and other people who are disabled or struggling with something, because at least in my own experience, too often it will become like I'll say something to just pull it out of ether here. Like I'll say something like, hey, like this is a little hard for me because of X, Y, and Z. And they're like, it will just get swept under the table like, oh, well, you seem so normal. Or well, like, oh, well, you seem fine. Oh, you're fine. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. You're fine. You're fine. It's like, takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort to look fine. But I definitely have run into that a lot where they're like, you can't be autistic because you can talk. And I'm like, tell me you don't know what autism is without telling me you don't know what autism is. It's a whole spectrum and there's a lot of diversity. You meet one autistic person, you meet one autistic person, you meet one chronically ill person, you meet one chronically ill person. There's shared experiences, but there's also individual experiences within that. And the more we talk about it, the less people are isolated and alienated. And that's how I was finally evaluated for EDS. Was basically my friend became educated on the subject through social media and their own experiences. And they were like, hey, I'm watching you like bend your fingers all the way backwards. Have you ever been evaluated for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? And I'm like, I never even thought about it. And the more awareness people have for whatever the topic, the more help people who may otherwise be struggling in silence can hopefully get.
Yes. And if my one little voice in the wilderness can make that difference for somebody, that's all I could hope for. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on. Tell our audience where we can find you.
So I am all over the place. You can go to my website at arlozgraves.com. I am most active on Thread. I love talking to people on Threads. I'm probably really obnoxious, to be completely honest, but I love being on Threads. That's my favorite social media. I'm also on Instagram. I have a Blue Sky. It's really hard for me to read on my screen, so I'm not over there very much, but I do pop over if you're not into Meta. I do have a Blue Sky. You can get my email off my website if you want to like say hi privately. Like you can do that. Now I'm like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have said email. But no, it's on my website. You can email me. But I love talking with creators and authors and just sharing experiences.
Yes, I can testify that Arlo is not annoying on Threads. And Threads is what Twitter used to be, like before it lost its mind.
Yeah.
It's like I was an early adopter on Twitter and it used to be really cool. And now it's not. And Threads is actually really cool. So I don't know what the shelf life on Threads is going to be.
Yeah. But right now I love it. It's really fun. Blue Sky is literally like, no matter how I adjust my screen or the settings, it's harder to get engagement, but I could learn how to do that. But it's just physically looking at it on my computer screen. I'm like, my brain, it hurts.
Blue Sky hurts me for a lot more reasons than that. I just can't get any engagement over there. But yeah, well, thanks a lot for your time. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.